Aiden O'Connell didn't throw a pass since like the end of the first quarter on Christmas Day last year. Like they're always going to lose some weird one, and it's going to make you scratch your head. But I don't think that's from them taking it off. I think it's just it is what it is. Like it's just part of it. Every team's going to come at you with their best, and you just have to deal with it.
When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll tour. When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a
Hey, Tyler. Hey, Piet.
What's going on? Welcome to the New Score podcast. My name is Pat. This is my co-host, TYG, Tyler Pratt. Tyler, how we be doing?
A couple things. One, the pups are barking. I even threw some, I forget the name of it, some good stuff on there. They're still barking. And then I've already bitched about it. It's fucking planes, dude. Non-stop. Just every like 45, no, I'd say like every minute and a half. But weird, right? Central New York of all places. So other than that, one day, baby. 1 day, 24 hours basically. I mean, I got throwing on my futures today. So after we're done recording, I gotta put in fucking all these bets. So basically, I'm either gonna make a lot of money tonight or I'm losing it.
And it is indeed going to be tonight because this episode is dropping Thursday. AFC West division preview, where those two-time defending Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs will be playing the Baltimore Ravens. What an opening night. What an opening kickoff.
What a treat.
It's tonight. The wait is over, Tyler. I mean, what a loud, exciting offseason. Every year is just so much buildup. So much buildup going into the season. The season always seems so far away. And then when it's here, man, it slaps you right in the face. We've been talking ball all week long. Football every single day. And the wait is over. We got a long season to talk about it. I'm pumped.
It's just like a vacation, you know, like one that you have planned for months and months and months, and then it finally comes around and you're like, holy shit, that snuck up fast. Didn't happen like that. I mean, this wait felt like forever for the NFL to get back. But since we started dropping those previews, time's flying. Can't wait.
It is. If you're on YouTube right now, don't forget to like and subscribe. Follow us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify so you don't miss those division previews or any of the episodes, previews, recaps that we drop throughout the season. It's going to be a long, eventful season on the New Score podcast. So we're pumped. We're very excited for football season. So today we're going to be talking AFC West, Kansas City Chiefs, Denver Broncos, Las Vegas Raiders. And of course, the Los Angeles Chargers with Jim Harbaugh in the building, your boy. I'm excited to get into the Los Angeles Chargers. We got some guests coming on this episode. We got Tyler coming in, the other Tyler, to talk about his Kansas City Chiefs as always. I'm excited to but we actually did talk to him already, and that was great catching up with him. You guys are going to see that first on this episode. It was great sitting down with him and getting his thoughts about the Kansas City Chiefs, what he thinks about opening night against Baltimore. And then I also had a guest on for the Denver Broncos, and that was a great talk. Bo Nix was definitely a topic of conversation, Russell Wilson as well. him leaving. You obviously got the new quarterback in there. Sean Payton's got somebody to groom in that quarterback room for the future. We're excited. We are excited. So, Tyler, let's kick it back to that interview. Let's start it off with the Kansas City Chiefs.
Here.
Joining once again on the New Score podcast to talk some Kansas City Chiefs, we got Tyler. How we doing, buddy?
What's going on, guys?
How we be doing?
Doing great. Anytime we got T squared in here, Tyler squared, it's a good day on the New Score podcast, talking some Kansas City Chiefs. Went over it in the intro. I mean, the rest of these teams we can go through. We're dropping all these division previews this week, and it's like they all have their optimism, and it's like this year is our year. They feel so good about it. But at the end of the day, I mean, you guys, two-time reigning, defending Super Bowl champions, somebody's got to knock you off that ledge. Somebody's got to take, the king off that castle. It's yours to lose. It's your league right now. Let's talk about this offseason that you guys had. You obviously had to make some moves because when you have Patrick Mahomes and you have Travis Kelce and you have all these great players that start producing on this defense and offensive line, you got to pay some, and then some, unfortunately, you got to let go. So let's talk about that. Some big losses for you guys this offseason. Willie Gay and then L'Jarius Sneed. L'Jarius Sneed, that's the big one for me. And Tyler, I remember we were talking about it going into the offseason, and I asked you, I said, what's the biggest need for the Kansas City Chiefs this offseason? We were talking about, they had to get a deal done with Chris Jones at that point. I don't believe Creed Humphrey had been paid at that point. And you said, we got to pay L'Jarius Sneed. You end up not paying him. He's in Tennessee now. I want to get your thoughts on that and how you think the cornerback room is going to look to start the season. Who's going to really have to step up for them? Additions on this team, though, they bring in Hollywood Brown at receiver. He's hurt right now to start the year, but it's like, okay, he's out. Rashee Rice is dealing with his nonsense. We know that. But they also drafted Xavier Worthy. And it's like, Tyler and I had our draft preview, and I'm pretty sure he had Worthy going to the Chiefs. And we talked about it right then and there. Like, all right, can you imagine this guy who just lit it up at the combine, 40-yard dash? That's like Tyreek Hill 2.0. You give him to Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, and that's what ended up happening. So I'm excited to see this kid out there. Obviously, Travis Kelce, still doing it at his age. He had a great postseason. Like, people could say what they want about his production all of last year, consistency, staying healthy. Obviously, at his age is going to be difficult. But when they needed to get it done in the postseason, especially that Ravens game, I remember that Ravens game, Travis Kelce really balled out for them. My questions right now for the Kansas City Chiefs, there's not much. Looking at this team, the offensive line looks great. The defense looks great. But it is a little concerning without L'Jarius Sneed, at least to start the season, in my opinion. But you have, you know what's going on, who's stepping up in the building in preseason at these practices. What are you expecting out of this cornerback room to start the season off?
Yeah, I mean, I knew you were going to bring up the paying L'Jarius Sneed comment right off the bat, and I still hold true to that. The challenge is Brett Veach hasn't paid any of their corners they brought in yet. They've let them all walk. I mean, look at Shavarius Ward. They let him walk when he was at probably a top 15 corner in the league, and they got a third round out of it. I don't think they were going to get much more out of that with having to pay him a new contract. So it is what it is. My concern is now all of a sudden Trent McDuffie has to be a number one guy too. So McDuffie had the easier matchups. Now you're almost, I hate to say downgrading both corners, but you are in some senses. But they had Shamari Connor last year. He stepped up. They brought him in as a safety. He became a slot corner pretty early on in the year, and he really stepped up. And then they have a bunch of big guys, really big bodies. Joshua Williams, he's 6'2" or something like that, 200 pounds. Jalen Watson, same thing. They've had those guys for 2-3 years in the building, and they're prototypical specs guys where they're just big bodies. They're going to beat you up at the line. I mean, just like L'Jarius Sneed was too. Like, everyone remembers the press he had against Tyreek in their playoff game where he knocked him to the ground twice and really kind of set the tone in that game too. Like Spags is always just going to bring in those types of guys. And I think right now their hope is just by having a quantity that one of these guys will get coached up. One of these guys will kind of make that next step and become a true, um, boundary corner there and be that true number two to let Trent McDuffie kind of do what he needs to and let the whole defense do what they need to. But my one worry, this is actually this past week, they put in waiver claims on three corners that they didn't get any of them because they're at 32, but they put in waiver claims on three guys that were cut this week. So obviously it's something that they're not 100% comfortable yet either. But I mean, it's really just going to depend on the season. And hopefully, either Jalen or Joshua, one of those two guys will step up and be that true number two.
Tyler, go ahead.
Just real quick, when you say Tyler, which one are you?
TP.
TP heard. Okay, all right. I'll kick it out. Here we go. So yeah, just touching on the corner room. I mean, looking at those PFF grades too for those other corners like Joshua Williams and Jalen Watson, they both Joshua 25, Watson 46. So Williams was graded as a number one corner, Watson as a number two, and they're the number 2 and 3 guys, and they don't even have to play the nickel because, as you said, that's Shamari Connor. I can see why they would make the claims because other than that, they got, I believe it's Nazi Johnson, who was a 7th round pick in 2022. So other than that, that's it. That's the end of the depth. So I think maybe it was more of just like a depth thing, trying to get some of those guys in there and just see if they can kind of turn their careers around a little bit. But other than that, I think the safety group, Justin Reed and Cook, we'll see. Other than that, though, I think their corners, I do like where they're at, though. I like where they're at with their secondary. I think they'll be all right. You got Spags always bringing blitzes 24/7, so he really puts the pressure on the corner group.
This is the first time we really started off a preview talking about that defense, is because, like I said, Tyler, you'd be nitpicking to concern yourself anything about this team when you get Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. But it is that cornerback position. So I'm glad we got a better grasp, a better understanding on that. Before we move on to the offense, I do want to talk about that front a little bit. Obviously, Chris Jones coming back. Karlaftis, I feel like, has stepped up in big games for that team. Besides those two guys, who do you expect to really step up on that front for them?
Well, that's the worry because Charles Omenihu, who probably won't be back until, they're ballparking November. He tore his ACL, I think it was AFC Championship game or divisional round. So he tore his ACL late last year. So they're hoping to get him back like full speed by the playoffs. But really, FAU, their first round pick from a year ago, he had really no meaningful snaps last year, and he really hasn't looked that good this preseason either. He is the guy that has to. They have to get some sort of production out of him. If they don't, that's actually my biggest worry, is then all of a sudden these corners are going to have to, hold for 4 or 5 seconds. And, Chris Jones and Karlaftis, they're going to scheme up and be able to take care of. So I think FAU is kind of make or break. I don't really see, a world where that defense is successful without him making at least some sort of stride and playing some sort of meaningful minutes.
One thing I mentioned about Spags, your D coordinator too, is like they don't always have, the best defenses to start out the year. But one thing about him is, and it's the same thing with Andy Reid in the offense, it's like they get better as the season goes on. And then once you get into the postseason, it's like this team is always playing at their peak, defense specifically. Like we've seen it. These last 2 playoff runs, the defense has, you could argue they've carried them. They've just been nails in those tough situations, in those pressure cooking games. Last postseason, it was on the road. They had to do it on the road, and they did. They played elite quarterbacks, and they did what they had to do to win football games. So I expect the defense to get better as the year goes on. And if you're concerned with the front, and we got concerns with cornerback as well, it might be, maybe a bit of a rocky road to start for this team. And maybe Mahomes does have to put up 30 in a couple of these games for them to pull out games. But one thing that we've learned about the Chiefs is like you can't count them out just because they lose a game in September and everybody thinks, the walls are falling down. This team shows year in, year out, they get better as the year goes on. And I expect that to be the same with this defense this year. Moving on to that offense, though, I brought up those weapons. Mahomes has got a lot of new toys to play with. There are some injuries. Kadarius Toney, another name I mentioned, is no longer on the team, so you don't have to worry about that trauma anymore. Pacheco is obviously coming back off of a great season. Edwards-Helaire is still there. To me, Tyler, I would have to say the only thing that would concern me on this offense right now would be right tackle. You brought in Juwan Taylor, paid him pretty good contract, and I feel like if there was one weakness on this team last season besides the drops from receiver, it was that right tackle position and dealt with some penalties as well. Would you agree with that?
I think yes and no. It's going to be really interesting to see, especially starting a rookie at left tackle too. But looking at Juwan Taylor, he jump in the snap his entire career, and then week 1 of last year they threw everything for a loop. So it was just kind of changing on the go. I'm actually more optimistic that he has a full off season under his belt in Kansas City to ideally kind of get all of that corrected and not have to worry about that and just worry about playing. But they've had issues at tackle ever since, Fish and Schwartz retired there. So that it is probably their weakest point, but I'm not as worried about Taylor as I am at left tackle because they're going to have either a rookie or a second year guy throughout the year. But I don't know. I guess I would agree. I think it is still their weak point, but also let's see what happens at wide receiver. You guys have seen with any Andy Reid offense, it takes a little bit to kind of get in the flow of it. And now they have 2 brand new guys in it. And they just brought in Juju, which at least he knows the offense, but he's also hasn't shown any production since being in Kansas City. So I think receiver's going to be the rockiest to start the year at least.
What's after that? Like, what do the running back options look like right now?
Oh, they just put Clyde on the non-football injury, reserve list, so he's out for the first 4 games. They just got Samaje Perine, so he'll probably be, kind of third down spell back, and then Carson
Good
Steele.
pickup.
He's actually, yeah, I agree. But Carson Steele is super interesting. He's an undrafted rookie who if you look up, he has a pet crocodile, and he is like they brought him in as a fullback, and he has that fullback mentality, but he's like a smaller guy. So I think he'll probably have a few awesome plays. I also think he's not going to be super dependable to start the year, but I think he could actually become one of those guys that can, kind of spell Pacheco. Because again, Pacheco runs so angry. He runs with so much kind of force and violence that you do worry about injuries, but I think Carson Steele does the same thing. So I think if he had to come in for it, Samaje Perine is your third down back, and Carson Steele, getting a few first and second down carries.
Tyler, looking at this offense, like I said, you'd be nitpicking, and looking at that tackle position, it's easy just to see that as a concern. What are your thoughts on this offense going into the season?
Yeah, I mean, again, other than nitpicking the tackles and left tackle, like Juwan Taylor, you expect him to. There can't be much regression there, right? Like we've seen him perform well in the past, and that's why he got paid. So he has to step up and have a better year this year, and I think he will. And then left tackle, though, right? Protecting Mahomes' blind side. It's either, how do you pronounce the last name? It's Kingsley. How do you pronounce his last name, Tyler?
It's Summa to a T. It ends at T. Yeah, Summa to a T.
Summa to a Tia. Okay. Kingsley Summa to a Tia.
Yeah, I always have to like think my way through it as I say it.
It's not easy. I'm sitting up looking at this, and I'm like, I'm just going to call him Kingsley. But yeah, second round pick this year.
Everybody does.
Right, exactly. And then you got Wanya Morris, third round pick last year. So between the two of them, they kind of have a tough task there. Other than that, you got Kelsey who's still getting it done. Pacheco, love the way he runs. I can't say that enough. I was just talking to Pachano about it yesterday during the draft, and we just love the way that he runs the football. obviously picking up P Ryan, I think two things that's good about that from a fan perspective is that he's kind of one of those more like underrated backs in the league that just kind of gets it done at a consistent level, kind of no matter where he goes. Cincinnati and Denver recently, and now coming in here, I think that he can do good things for their offense. Kind of be that McKinnon that they from last year, years past. But I also like that from Denver because it gives McLaughlin, I think, Jaleel being able to get more snaps now. That's because he's talented. Either way, you're nitpicking here. It's Rashee Rice. That's the big question mark for me. Is like what's going to happen with him if he's there clear number one, and then it's going to be real fun to see how Worthy is utilized in this scheme under Andy Reid. But Rashee Rice, I don't know if he's going to is the possibility of him getting any time there, or is it more so maybe just having to legally face a couple fines, and then the NFL is going to launch their investigation because we know that they like to play, lawyer number two. So I guess I don't know if you have any insight on kind of how that's all supposed to play out with Rice.
Yeah, every report I've read is that anything legal won't happen until 2025, and then the NFL historically has always let the legal process work out. So theoretically, he wouldn't be suspended until 2025. He is not. He didn't start the year on the commissioner's exempt list or anything like that, like players have in the past. So everything points to him being there all season, unless something moves quicker than expected. But yeah, I think from a legal standpoint, it won't be till 2025, and the NFL again historically has always followed that.
That's good for their offense. That's big time.
Right. And the last position we need to address on the offense is that tight end position. Obviously, Hall of Famer Travis Kelce coming back for another season, but there's some real depth in that room. So it's like if Kelce does have to miss a week or two, like Noah Gray has stepped up in the past, and then they trade for Peyton Hendershot from Tyler's Cowboys just a couple weeks ago. They get him in the room, and then you have Jared Wiley, another young tight end in that room. How are you feeling about the tight end unit as a whole right now? And say Kelce were to miss a couple games, do you expect it to be Noah Gray to step up, or do they have a plan for Hendershot or Wiley?
Yeah, no, I think you kind of hit the nail right on the head. But I will say, I don't think Hendershot is really. They're not bringing him in for tight end. They're bringing him in for special teams. He seems like that Dave Toub guy. That I mean, he had 400 and some odd special team snaps in Dallas. I think that's really his role in it. But I think the goal is that Wiley's the guy. They spent a fourth rounder on him this year, and if you watch his college film, I mean, obviously he doesn't look like Kelsey, but he did a great job finding the openings. He did a great job kind of ad-libbing and finding those soft spots like Kelsey does right now. Like I think the goal is absolutely Wiley would be taking over for Kelsey down the road. So ideally everything goes according to plan that really Wiley stepping in without, and they're not missing too much of a beat.
Finishing this off, just kind of going over an outlook. It's got to be an incredible feeling going into the season. I mean, opening night is coming up just days away in Kansas City. Another banner is going to be, out there at Arrowhead. You're going for a three-peat right now. So it's like, are you a little concerned at all where it's like maybe they take a foot off the pedal during the regular season because it's just like, once you win that much, the regular season can get a little boring, I think, in my opinion. And it's just hard to kind of bring that same tenacity. It's like Andy Reid he's always done a great job of making it fun to come to work. So it's like these guys are always going to enjoy showing up, putting in the work and playing football. I'm not saying that, but maybe it does get a little boring, throughout the regular season because it's like, all right, well, we just got to get to the playoffs. We just got to get to the playoffs. What are your thoughts on that? And then looking at the rest of the division right now, obviously they all got to take you down, but what are your thoughts just kind of on the rest of the division? How's that going to play out?
Yeah, so I'll kind of go through. Everyone wants to make the Patriots comparisons, right? And they won with so many different makeups of teams, and they kept evolving. And if you look at the Chiefs' past 3 years, they've done the same thing. They've taken a weakness and overloaded it into a strength. Like with the Bucks Super Bowl loss, they then spent all this money on offensive line. After last year, the wide receivers, they brought in a bunch of new guys. So I think complacency just isn't in that building, for lack of a better term. I mean, it's a revolving door for positions of weakness. So I really don't think that they're going to become complacent on that side of it. As far as kind of taking it off and or taking games off in the regular season, they always have some weird games. I mean, they lost to the Raiders when Aiden O'Connell didn't throw a pass since like the end of the first quarter on Christmas Day last year. Like they're always going to lose some weird one, and it's going to make you scratch your head. But I don't think that's from them taking it off. I think it is what it is. Like, it's just part of it. Every team's going to come at you with their best, and you just have to deal with it. And again, it's not like the NBA where it's 82 games and you can take a few games off. If you lose 2 games you shouldn't, all of a sudden you're going to Baltimore again for the AFC title game, or you're on the road the entire playoffs. So no, I don't think they'll take anything off on that side of it. And just looking at it, I mean, this team is largely the same as last year. The only difference is they traded a strength at corner to a strength at wide receiver. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how that evolves. And then looking at like the rest of the division, I'm worried about the Chargers long term, but not necessarily this coming year. I think obviously Harbaugh's awesome, but it's going to be interesting to see how he is that roster changes that team dynamic. And I do think that they will end up being good over the next couple of years. Raiders, they need to figure out their quarterback situation, but they're always going to play them tough. And Max Crosby's always going to wreak havoc. And, I think that's always going to be a tough game. And then looking at the Broncos, my one hot take for this upcoming year is that Bo Nix, and I'm biased being an Oregon fan, but Bo Nix, I don't think he's gonna be the best quarterback out of this class by any stretch of the imagination, but I could see him being like Mac Jones-esque of having actually a pretty decent start to his career and then it falling off. I think Sean Payton will set him up for success if nothing else. So I don't think the Broncos are necessarily an easy out either, but I do think the Chargers are their biggest threat. And especially because the Chargers are always the off-season, favorites, the off-season, oh, look out for these guys this year. I think this is the first year that I genuinely am worried about the Chargers going into a season.
TP, finishing thoughts on the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, this is just their year. I mean, to kind of echo what Tyler said, I don't think that they can sleep on the rest of the division, and kind of what we touched on before he got here is I think that some of those teams can give them, they can make it tough on them, but I don't see them being able to do it like Kansas City for the stretch of the entire season. The Chargers, I think Harbaugh's going to come in there and make them better than they have been for sure, but I don't see the Chargers getting within 2 games of the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs can have an 11-12. They're probably right in that range, maybe 12 wins this year, 12-5. I don't know if I see the Chargers getting double digits. So it's their division. They're minus 260 to take the division, which is a bet I think I'm going to hammer. I might drop my entire bank account on them winning the division at minus 260. Then conference is plus 300. So I don't know. I mean, other than, maybe the Ravens again. I don't know who, besides maybe an AFC East team, but that division's so tough. I don't know. They're all going to beat each other up. I don't know who's going to end up, if anyone's going to get more wins in the conference than the Chiefs. So from a betting perspective too, I'm kind of all over the Chiefs this year.
They did it last year when nobody thought they were going to, because they had to go on the road and they didn't have, the weapons that they do now or that they've had in the past. So it's like, if they could do it last year, it's like, man, I feel good. I feel good about Patrick Mahomes no matter where the game is being played. That's what it comes down to. But Tyler, it's been a blast catching up with you, talking some Kansas City Chiefs. Best of luck this season and opening night against those Baltimore Ravens. It should be fun.
Yeah, no, appreciate it, guys. Always great to be on, and hopefully we'll be on talking playoffs here, a few months.
Yes, sir.
All right. Joining the podcast now to talk about some Denver Broncos, we got Kyler. Kyler, how are we doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to see you. Appreciate you coming on, talking some Denver Broncos with me. Let's dive into it. It's been a busy offseason for you guys. So you bring in Brandon Jones, you draft Bo Nix in the first round. You also signed Zach Wilson in the offseason. You bring in Malcolm Roach, DN, and then you also signed Josh Reynolds, wide receiver. You just cut Tim Patrick. That's something I want to talk about with you. You obviously lose Russell Wilson. You're dealing with that contract. Just very messy situation with Russell Wilson, but he's out of the building now. You got Bo Nix, you got Zach Wilson. You also lost Justin Simmons. So I'm curious to see what that defense is going to look like without his presence out there. You lose center Lloyd Cushenberry. You also get rid of Jerry Jeudy. He goes to the Browns. And then you lose Josie Jewell, who is a guy I really grew fond of last season at linebacker. I think he went to Carolina, but that's a guy that I felt really came on. Obviously, you got Jonathan Cooper, Cody Barton, and Alex Singleton at linebacker as well. So solid group, especially Singleton, another guy I like a lot. But you do lose Josie Jewell. Questions for me that I have. I mean, last year teams finishes 8-9, very underwhelming year in Sean Payton's debut for the Denver Broncos. Obviously, you finished third in the division. You missed the playoffs. Right now, you guys over under is sitting at 5.5. They're not expecting much from the Denver Broncos. How confident are you right now about Bo Nix leading this offense? As he was named the starter. We thought it was going to be Jarrett Stidham, maybe Zach Wilson, and now it's Bo Nix. How did you feel about them drafting him, and how do you feel about him going into the season?
Yeah, so I was actually kind of surprised when they drafted him, but having since drafted him, I've gained more confidence in listening to Sean Payton talk about the process that went into that, what he saw in Bo Nix. And I would say that I'm cautiously optimistic about the team moving forward. Bo Nix is obviously a rookie. There's going to be some growing pains there, but I think that they landed a gem. I think that Bo Nix fits into Sean Payton's system pretty well. He has all the attributes of a quarterback that Sean Payton looks for. I think when you look at Bo Nix, you see a guy that can process quickly, that can learn an offense fast, that can progress through his reads. So I think that overall, and I heard from inside sources that Bo Nix was actually the third guy on the list. Now, whether or not that's true or if Sean Payton's just blowing smoke, that's to be debated. But from the sources I heard, that it went Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and then Bo Nix. So we got our guy. He fits the system well. I'm really hoping that he works out. And from what we've seen in preseason, now like it's only preseason, but you know you can only play who you're lined up against. You know, so whether it's backups, whether it's starters, Bo Nix has gone through his progressions. He's looked actually really well in the preseason. I don't know his exact QB rating, but I think it was over 100 in his first preseason start. And I want to say it was at least 100 in his second start. So, you know, time will tell. He's got a big challenge coming forward. First week 1 on the road against Seattle. It's going to be a tough matchup, you know, but I'm definitely optimistic. I feel better about Bo than I felt about any of the last quarterbacks. The last, you know, what has it been, 8 years now, 9 years on the quarterback carousel. So.
Right. Looking at what Bo Nix has to work with, looking at the offensive line, I think the offensive line looks good. Not great, but I think it looks good. Quality offensive line, and Sean Payton can do what he's going to do with them.
Mm-hmm.
The weapons, though, they did cut Tim Patrick. I'm a little curious about that. I know they were trying to move him, and I thought Tim Patrick is a guy, he's dealt with his injuries, these last couple of years, but when he has been healthy, he's been a really good receiver. So I was excited to see him come back into that offense with Sean Payton. And then obviously you got Cortland Sutton, you got Marvin Mims coming back, who I like Marvin Mims a lot. Josh Reynolds, another guy you signed. And then at running back, you got Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, who I think a guy people are sleeping on going into the season because they just cut Samaje Perine. So I expect McLaughlin to really carve out a critical role in that offense. I'm excited to see what they do with him. But just looking at their weapons, who do you see as like that third? Obviously, you got Javonte Williams, you got Cortland Sutton. Who do you see as that third option that's really going to step up and help?
Well, you got Court, right? He's the vet in the room. You saw Cortland last year with Russell Wilson come down with a lot of huge catches in critical moments. They obviously, as you mentioned, they cut Tim Patrick. I think that was a testament to the depth that they have in the wide receiver room right now. They drafted Troy Franklin, Devon Vele. Devon Vele stepped up in a big way in camp. I think Jaleel McLaughlin is going to step up in a big way for this team. He's kind of their speed back, their Darren Sproles, if you will. So I would see Jaleel McLaughlin stepping up in a big way. I think Bo leans heavy on Court this year, but I'm also interested to see which of those up-and-coming wide receivers he leans on. I think Vele will bring a lot to this team this year as well.
And then just going through their defense, Kyler, they do lose Justin Simmons, as I mentioned, but then they brought in Brandon Jones. And then you got Surtain at lock and at corner. Damari Mathis is out right now, and then you got Turner Yell, who's also out. And Jaquan McMillan is a guy I thought really came on last season. I thought he played really well on that Denver defense. Do you have any concerns when looking at this defense?
See, I feel more from what I've heard. I feel more confident in their defensive line than I have in any years past. I mean, they brought in additions to the defensive line. They brought in Jonathan Franklin Myers, Malcolm Roach, DJ Jones is still there. He's a solid piece of that line. I feel confident in the defensive line more than I have so in years past. It's actually the secondary that worries me, which is a bit of a contrast to years prior where we had, Justin Simmons, K-Jax in the secondary at safety position. We had Pat Surtain. So I actually feel like the weak part of this defense this year is actually going to be whoever lines up across from PS2 in that second QB2 spot and the safety spot, because they brought in Brandon Jones. They believe he's the guy that's going to fit in Vance Joseph's system, but that's to be seen. So I think the big question is whoever they've got on that roster that's going to step up across from Pat Surtain, because they're going to come for him. They're going to gun for whoever's in that number 2 spot because they're not going to throw at Surtain. So, and then at that safety position, will Brandon Jones fit into the system nicely? And and PJ Locke's been good, but it's been flashes, and he needs to show consistency, and he needs to stay healthy at that position.
Got it. Last question I had is just kind of an overview for expectations going into this season, because I'm just curious, like, how Denver Broncos feel right now, where they're at, because I know it's been a tough couple of years, and it's really been, I mean, since Peyton left, it's been like a roller coaster for the Denver Broncos. I feel like just a lot of different moving parts going on. Right now, as I said, they're over under sitting at 5.5. You got Patrick Mahomes in your division, who you got to play twice. You got Jim Harbaugh now with the Chargers, so you expect them to turn it around. The Raiders are, I think, going to be competitive. I don't think they're going to be a great football team, but I think they're going to be competitive, and it's going to be a dogfight to play them.
Yep.
I'm curious, best case scenario, what happens with the Denver Broncos this 2024 season, and then what would be the worst case?
Okay, so best case scenario, I think our ceiling as a team this year is Bo Nix hits the ground running right away, progresses through his growing pains. I think ceiling for this team is wild card and a playoff berth. We haven't had one since that 2015 championship season. So I think ceiling for this team is wild card or divisional round. I don't see him getting much further than that. I think floor is some growing pains with the rookie quarterback, and maybe 5 or 6 wins. But if going with my gut, I heard 90% of. I did see that the over under was 5.5. I heard that 90% of bettors are hitting the over on that, and I would confidently myself hit the over on that bet. I think that they've got a tough schedule, but I'm confident with Bo Nix, and they've got a hungry, talented young team. And based on what we've seen thus far in training camp and the preseason, they're hitting on all cylinders. So I'm predicting about a 7 to 8 win season. And if they could reach a 7 to 8 win season, I think that's a win. They went 8-9 with Russell Wilson last year. And Russell Wilson was a guy, he's a good quarterback, but he doesn't quite fit into Sean's system. So if Tim Tebow, if they can at least hit 8-9 with a rookie quarterback, I would say that's a really good start.
And you got a great coach. You got a great guy in the room, like implementing the culture. He's proven that he can win in the National Football League. It's only a matter of time before the Broncos get on that level. So I'm polling for Bo Nix to be that guy and really take the league by storm this year, because, boy, if you got the Denver Broncos playing good football, then that AFC West really gets interesting and it really heats up. But Kyler, It's been a blast talking some Denver Broncos with you. Appreciate you, and we'll be sure to have you on throughout the season.
Thanks for having me on, Pat.
I know you unfortunately missed that segment with the Broncos. What are any general thoughts or maybe takes that you have on the Denver Broncos this season?
Oh boy. It's just going to be, I'm always intrigued anytime we get a rookie quarterback that's going to lead a football team, right? Like, I don't think anyone's going to be taking Bo Nix's spot, right? Like, it's kind of his team moving forward. He's got Sean Payton, and we know what Sean Payton can do. So I don't know, I'm just excited, I think, to see that happen. And they've had a rough couple of years. So I don't know, just more competition from them inside the division, spice this thing up. It's been a one-horse race for quite a while. So I think any young talent, especially at the quarterback position, a little inspiring. I'd like to see Denver get back to where they used to be. Yeah, but other than that, I don't think they stand a chance this year. No shot. They're finishing last in the division. If you can find that, bet it. The Raiders will finish ahead of them. The Chargers most likely will finish ahead of them. And obviously the Chiefs. So if you can find that, bet it.
I would hope those Chargers finish ahead of them this season. And that's who we're talking about right now, is the new regime, Los Angeles Chargers. Tyler, I don't know how many times last season we spoke on this podcast or ranted about Brandon Staley and how bad of a head coach he was in the NFL. He's a great defensive coordinator, or he's had great years as a defensive coordinator, I should say. But his whole time with the Chargers as head coach was bad. And that team just looked uninspired in a lot of games as well last year. I don't think a lot of guys really wanted to go to work for Brandon Staley. So what a culture shock, what a culture change to get Jim Harbaugh in that room. You bring in all his guys. Greg Roman's now the OC. He's got the strength and conditioning coach. You got all these guys that he took from Baltimore, or he took from Michigan with him. And obviously he plucks them. That's something I noticed these last, when Harbaugh was at Michigan, and then obviously John, his brother, with the Ravens. They kind of just been plucking from each other's staffs for like the entire tenure that Harbaugh was at Michigan. And you saw guys like going back and forth from Michigan to the league to be on like the Ravens staff, and then going down to Michigan as well. And that connection still exists, and I think that's something that doesn't really get talked about ever, but something I noticed. So, like I said, whole new culture change in that room, and all of a sudden, an organization that when the going got tough, late game situations, or even if they come out to a big lead, you us as non-biased, no part of the Chargers, we see it, and then Chargers fans see it like they expect to lose. Like they expect everything to go wrong. It's going back to the days of Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers is one of my favorite players to ever play in the NFL. But there's just it's like a curse. It really is like this team for so long. There's just something that would always go wrong. And I just feel like if there's one guy to step into that room right now and make that feeling go away, it's a guy like Jim Harbaugh, where every single place he's been, he's turned it around and made that program or that team a contender. Like what he did with the Michigan program, remarkable. You know, we can go on and on about everywhere he's done. Obviously, in the NFL, he did it with the 49ers, turned an organization that was in disarray at one time, comes in and right away they're competitive and they're in the Super Bowl. So I really like this roster if they could stay healthy. There's some guys that are up there in age that have dealt with some injuries now, but the culture is the biggest thing to me, and I'm excited to see what Jim Harbaugh does. What are your takes on just Harbaugh taking over the Chargers before I get into this roster?
Love it. I love it. I think that, we discussed all the landing spots for Harbaugh. We knew he was, kind of being forced out of Michigan in a way, but, either way, we knew he was leaving and coming to the NFL, and we went over the possible landing spots for him. And I think we all knew that LA was going to be probably the favorite, and he ended up taking it. We knew Staley was on his way out, obviously, because he sucked. And by the way, do we know where Staley went? I feel like he did. He got a gig somewhere, right?
He did. I'm not sure.
Whatever.
I thought maybe the Niners. Go ahead. I'll look it up.
But yeah, and then to touch on the pieces he brought with him, the coaching staff, love it. Bringing in Greg Roman, Jesse Minter's coming with him. I get to see the coaches that I enjoyed watching in college, and I get to see them take over the Chargers, who I think is safe to say they were miscoached. But they last year they ran into injuries with Herbert, and it was just teams have those shitty years where just nothing seems to go right for them. That was like that. Yeah, the Chargers they have more than the average team. But yeah, so I'm excited to see Harbaugh back in here, and the first year that he went from Stanford to San Francisco, led them to I think it was like 11-5 record. So
I know Harbaugh wants to implement bully football, and what they did in the draft was drafting Joe Alt right off the bat. So his first pick as a Charger is a dominant offensive lineman. So that just tells you. And then obviously they bring in Gus Edwards from Baltimore, power back. They bring in J.K. Dobbins as well, both those guys. And then they draft the running back in the 6th round this year. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with Herbert's health early in the season. I'm going to be looking out for that. On top of the running backs that they brought in, they lose Keenan Allen, obviously. They lose Mike Williams. Those two guys who've been there for years. It's like you drafted Quentin Johnson last year, and he did not show up in his rookie season. Can we expect more out of him this year? You draft Lad McConkey this year with your 2nd-round pick. So he's in there. You got Joshua Palmer, and then you brought in DJ Chark. So also Darius Davis, draft pick last year, who I'm excited for Darius Davis. I think that they can carve out a role for him. He's fast. Other than that, though, Tyler, you had mentioned before we started recording, they just cut Donald Parham Jr. So they're looking at Will Dissly and Hayden Hurst right now, solid 2 tight ends. So that's another thing. They're going to play a lot of 2 tight end sets, you would think, with what the receivers look like and what the tight ends. And that just hurt Harbaugh's personality, of course. So for me, looking at this offense, there's some potential. A lot of young guys at receiver. So it's like, can you expect Joshua Palmer and DJ Chark to step into the role of being a number one while these young guys get groomed? It's all about Justin Herbert's health to me, though, looking at this offense.
Without Herbert, they're shot. Again, they've just got no chance. Even if Easton Stick plays well above expectations, they just don't. They don't have, what they used to have around Herbert. Excuse me, like Mike Williams. I know he was hurt a lot, but him, Keenan Allen, and now it's Joshua Palmer and DJ Chark, and then you have to kind of hope that Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston are up to speed quickly. Quentin Johnston had a bad, I think it's safe to say he had a disappointing year last year after being a first-round pick for him. So they not only are looking and hoping that he has a bounce-back year, they need him to if they're going to, really compete. And then they're going to need Ladd McConkey to probably be, if not their number one leading receiver, number two. Because when you look at who they have, I don't see DJ Chark leading this team in receiving. And it's Palmer or McConkey to me. It's one of those two who's going to lead this team in receiving. I'm curious to see. That's the most interesting race for me, is to see like who leads this team in receiving if they have 1,000-yard receiver. Especially with how much they're going to try to run the ball. I don't know if that'll happen. But also interesting, both the backs that they bring in are from Baltimore, like you pointed out earlier. But this offensive line, they bring in Joe Alt. Rashawn Slater's good, but other than that, the interior of that offensive line is
Bradley Bozeman. Forgot to mention they did pick him up. That's pretty good for them.
Right. So they gotta figure that out in the interior. But I don't think you look at their offense and you're like, yeah, I love what they got. Yeah, I think you look at their offense and you're like, if Justin Herbert's healthy, he's got his work cut out for him. And they need to get the run game going. And you really hope J.K. Dobbins can stay healthy, because I think if J.K. Dobbins can't stay healthy for a full season, he can actually be one of the better backs in the league. He just has that kind of potential. And you can see how efficient he can be when he's getting carries, but he's not getting carries because he's never healthy. So I really hope he can stay healthy for him, because that can be a game changer for their offense if they can have Dobbins in there consistently.
Moving on to the defense. So they brought back Joey Bosa. He's still there. Him and Khalil Mack. And then you got Derwin James still in the back. I know all three of those guys, there were some rumors going back to last year if those guys were still going to be there. But they're back for another season. You got Denzel Perryman in the middle on that defense now. Looking at the cornerbacks and the secondary, Tyler, Asante Samuel Jr., he's back as their cornerback. He's played pretty good football in this league since he's been in. They bring in Christian Fulton, who is no longer part of the Titans, guy that struggled early in his career, but there's definitely some potential there. And then I'm looking at nickelback, Jasir Taylor, Derwin James, and Alohi Gilman are fill out at the safety position. You just expect Derwin James to start playing better and start playing to his potential. Not getting I know last year there were some penalties that he got. I expect Derwin James to really show out this year, and I think that has to do with this culture change and having Harbaugh there and just getting these guys to love football again and going to work and competing. And I think that's Derwin James. That's one of the guys you're going to see really step up and do what we know he's capable of doing. Other than that, Tyler, looking at the front, I think this team is going to have to rely on some guys to step up that not a lot of people know. Junior Colson. I don't want to forget about Junior Colson. That's a draft pick I really liked in the draft. I wanted the Rams to get him. You know all about Junior Colson from his time in Michigan. The guy's just a dog. Another guy that comes with Harbaugh from Michigan. And I expect that guy to be the leader on that defense, maybe halfway through the season. Well, not the leader, but one of the leaders, because I think that kid, like I said, he's a dog.
He was huge for their defense last year, and I think Harbaugh definitely wanted to get him in the room. But when I look at their defense as a whole, I think of it as more top heavy, right? They have those few guys: Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Derwin James. Even though he didn't have a great year last year, we know he can be one of the best safeties in the league. And then I think Asante Samuel Jr. is very solid too. But again, top heavy with a few studs, and then there's not much balance in between, right? It's like top heavy to I got questions on that group, or I got questions at that position. D tackle, and then I mean, I know they have Bosa, listed here at the will, but yeah, it's going to be. I don't really know if they're going to run the 3-4 this year under Jesse Minter, but either way, I can't see Bosa. I feel like they're just going to line him up and at the end spot and let him get after the quarterback. Could be wrong, but either way, again, you have those few guys, but other than that, that D tackle spot, even depth behind Bosa. They got Tui. I fucking can't pronounce his name. Tui Pelotu. Either way, uh, Henley, a 3rd-round pick last year. Like, they just don't have a lot of guys that you're gonna look at this group and be like, oh yeah, no, they're going to be a good unit. You don't. You top heavy Bosa, Mack, Derwin James, and then other than that, and one corner, I think that they have an okay corner group, but there's just a lot that has to go right for this group. And it's not like they have an offense that I think is going to carry them either. So that's what worries me overall about this team is like, normally if you have one right on one side of the ball, you lack a little bit, the other side of the ball can pick that up. With like the Browns, for example, offense slacks, the Browns defense keep them together. Steelers, 100% is that case. Their offense was dead. No, their offense was awful last year. Defense kept it together. I don't know that either side of the ball for this Chargers team can do that. If their defense is struggling, I don't know if their offense is going to keep them in it, and vice versa. So that's why I don't know. I just don't feel great, even though Harbaugh loved the coaching staff. They have work to do. I feel like they have their work cut out for them with this roster, and some of those guys that are the studs, they're older, like you mentioned. They're getting old. They got their work cut out for them with this roster. Dicker the kicker, I like him.
It's a bright spot.
Yeah, bright spot. Their special teams unit was ranked 1st last year, and from what I've been, what I mentioned the other day about how special teams could, be even more important this year than it ever has been with the new kickoff rules. From what I've seen in preseason, if that's any indication, if you have a top unit on your special team, or your special teams is one of the top units in the league, like that can go a long way for your team and really set you up for success. So that might be the best thing they got going for them. But I don't know. I just got a lot of questions on this team right now, and I'm not super confident in them. And I think that's why when you asked me about Denver, and I said the Raiders will finish ahead of them and the Chargers should, hesitation is because I don't feel super confident about what I see from their roster as a whole right now.
Got to stay healthy for this team to have a shot. Right now, their win-loss is sitting at 8.5. And if you're having thoughts about them finishing last in the division potentially, taking the under would be plus 130. How do you feel about that?
I actually like it. I think that 8 and 9 is pretty reasonable for this team. And again, just to circle back real quick and piggyback on those guys staying healthy, they generally are not. Bosa generally is missing games every year. Khalil Mack missing games every year. Derwin James missing games every year. Justin Herbert lately missing a lot of time. These guys that they absolutely need to stay healthy to have success are missing consistent time for them. So they do kind of need everything, all the pieces to fall the right way for them. But your point about the culture and everything is huge. And that's the thing though, that can obviously turn an organization around, is just getting the good, the right culture in there. and then piece by piece putting that together. But 8.5, it's plus 130 for the under, minus 155 for the over. I mean, I think there's more value in the under there than there is the over. So me personally, I'm not saying this is a lock, but I feel a lot better betting the under on this team than I do the over at 8.5.
I would have to agree, and that's why I brought it up because it did stick out to me as we're just talking about this. I think I felt better about this team this season before we did this than I do now, and that's the only time this has happened. While we've been doing all of these teams, as I'm going through it, it's like, damn, they are pretty top heavy when you really look at this team, and those guys do have health concerns. So
yeah,
obviously, we both expect the Chargers to be a contender for years to come with Jim Harbaugh, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time, to really get everybody he wants in the building. And
right.
talking about culture, it does take time to implement that. And when you're in the same division as a team who's won 2 Super Bowls in a row, going for a three-peat, it's tough. But you do have 2 games against the Broncos. You do have 2 games against the Raiders. Those are very winnable games for you. So I'm not too high on this team competing for a division title this year. In your opinion, though,
No.
what would a successful season be for the Chargers this year?
Wild card. I think, above 500, Justin Herbert stays healthy. Maybe you get a wild card, maybe you don't. In the AFC, it's going to be tough. Successful season for them is going to be Justin Herbert staying healthy, them getting at least 9 wins, right? Finishing above 500, and just seeing consistency from this team overall, because that's what we haven't been able to see the last couple of years. And the biggest thing, like I mentioned, is Herbert. If he can stay healthy for an entire season, he's going to have people sneaking him into that top 5 quarterback in the NFL conversation because he's that talented. The kid is that good. He just needs to stay on the field. It's going to be hard for this team, I think, to make the playoffs in the AFC. I think you're going to need at least 10 wins to get in. I don't see 10 wins out of this team. So I don't have them making the playoffs. I definitely don't have them anywhere near the Chiefs for the division. And they're at plus 350. Like I feel more comfortable taking the Commanders to win the division than I do the Chargers here. Notice a culture change. And then just having confidence at the end of the year that they are trending in the right direction.
All right, let's cap this off and talk about our final team, the Las Vegas Raiders. Antonio Pierce brought back for his second season. These guys, you could really tell they love playing for this dude. They really came on at the end of last season, the defense especially. We saw what they did against the Chiefs on that Christmas Day game. Like, there's just a hunger and a will that we didn't see, certainly with Josh McDaniels, and we see it now with Antonio Pierce. So I'm interested to see if that lasts, like the duration of the season. I know they got Devontae Adams, who's a top 5 receiver in this league, I think still. But quarterback is a concern, and you don't want to be concerned with your quarterback. We love Gardner Minshew probably more than any other podcast in America. But at the end of the day, it still is a concern to me. You bring in Christian Wilkins, which was a huge addition for me, just because you pair him up next to Max Crosby. That's something I talked about in our offseason recap episode, is that front can be really scary. And then Malcolm Kuntz as well on the other side of Crosby. Those guys can get after the quarterback. We know what Max Crosby is. He's defensive player of the year candidate out there.
Stud.
So he's an absolute stud. And then Christian Wilkins now in the middle. I love that for the Raiders. I love that for the kind of culture that they're trying to implement, and just gritty, hard nose, punch you in the mouth football. And it's like Antonio Pierce said it, you got to cut the head off the snake, and that being Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. And you do that by getting after him. So good for them paying Christian Wilkins. The secondary is going to be concerning, though, Tyler. I mean, Jack Jones is shown to really – he's revived his career with the Raiders. He's looked really good since he's gone there. Nate Hobbs had a pretty good year in the slot, but that second corner position is it's going to be interesting what happens there. I know they drafted Richardson this year in the 4th round, but that guy that they're going to pair up on the other side of Jack Jones, and it's like, can Jack Jones – I know he had a good year last year. Can he stay at that level, though? Because before last year, there were some inconsistencies. So I'm curious to see how their cornerbacks stack up. And then safeties. I like Morig a lot. Him and Marcus Epps back there. I think they're going to be fine at safety. Linebackers, Diablo and Spillane, very good. Spillane especially, since he's gone with the Raiders. He's a freak of nature out there. Very physical. And then Diablo, very athletic linebacker, who they could do a lot of things with. They also drafted Tommy Eichenberg from Ohio State this year. Another guy I wanted the Rams to draft. And I know him well from his time at Ohio State. He was a great leader on that defense. Maybe he steps up and carves out a key role in this defense this season. But I think when you look at this team on paper, they did bring in Brock Bowers, obviously, in the draft this year at tight end. If you look at this team on paper, I think that it's going to have to be defensive reliant. Like the secondary, if the secondary can step up for this team, it's going to be a defensive reliant team, and then kind of ball control. You don't have Josh Jacobs anymore. Zamir White's in there with Alexander Madison. And you got Devontae Adams too. But I don't think you really want to get in a shootout with anybody. So bring in Luke Getsy, who was with the Bears and got a lot of heat from his time in Chicago. So that was interesting to see him get a job right off the bat there, especially because I knew there were some rumors about Cliff Kingsbury going there, but they end up getting Getsy. It's a lot of unknown for me, Tyler. Who's going to step up for next to Devontae Adams on the receiving core as well?
Yeah, their staff got a grade of dead last in the NFL. PFF, like, they're grading this staff as number 32 as far as the coaching goes. So they're not confident that they're going to be able to get the most out of their players, clearly. But as long as these guys love playing for Pierce, I think they're going to do just fine. Looking at the roster top to bottom, I really don't think they're in that bad of a spot. I do think that offensively, I like Zamir White. Alexander Madison, we've seen him be a good number 2 in Minnesota. And then when he had to be the guy, he wasn't it, because he's not. He's, I think, a great number 2 back, right, that can come in and, be a change of pace, be a bruiser, right, high, fresh, not high, just fresh. And he can be good, right, as a number 2. So I like the 1-2 punch there. I think their offensive line is actually solid. And then they got Jackson Powers-Johnson in the 2nd round, who's probably going to end up starting at somewhere in the interior, most likely one of the guard spots for him by the end of the year, if he doesn't start week 1. So I like what they have up front in the trenches on both sides of the ball, which goes a long way in the NFL. And then their receiving group, like the tight ends, those have to be one of the better, if not the best, young tight end duo in the NFL. You bring in Bowers, who I think most NFL fans can agree they're very excited to see. When you bring in a talent like this, like we saw Kyle Pitts, we were all excited for Kyle Pitts, and obviously that's been disappointing. But you see a talent like this coming to the NFL at the tight end position, it's not every year. So he can be an absolute stud. Michael Mayer is good. I think he's a solid tight end. He was their 2nd round pick last year. So they have a lot invested at the tight end group right now. Devontae Adams, we all know who he is. He's a number 1. I think Jacoby Myers is a little underrated. I think he's actually a pretty good receiver. And then I like Trey Tucker and DJ Turner. I think they're really good slot. They're just super quick. You get them in the open field, you can do a lot with those guys as far as, gadget. You can bring them in the backfield. So I think that they have a lot to work with on the offensive side of the ball. It's just going to come down to Gardner. It's going to come down to Gardner Minshew. And if he's not getting, if he's not cutting it, I don't think they'll wait too long before they try to throw Aiden O'Connell back into the mix. I really hope Gardner can just get it done. What did they say? Minshew mania. So I'm really hoping that we don't see Aiden O'Connell, because that'll mean that the Raiders are playing decent ball. So, and we're always pulling for Gardner, always. And on the defensive side of the ball, you already covered it. That I love the front seven. It's just really the corner number 3, who's going to be, or even that second corner, right? When Nate Hobbs has to go into the nickel to cover the slot, like who's going to be that other guy on the outside across from Jack Jones? That's the question mark on that defensive side of the ball. Otherwise, I think they have again a solid front seven. That secondary depth is a concern. Good special. Love Carlson, AJ Cole, Trey Tucker returning. I like this team more than I like. Let me pull back a little bit. I like this roster more than I like the Chargers roster. But on the flip side, I love the Chargers coaching staff, and I don't love quarterback. Exactly. I love the coaching staff and the quarterback. I don't love this coaching staff. And realistically, I don't love that Gardner Minshew is the starting quarterback, but pulling for him because he's the man. Always. So that's where I'm at right now.
And you nailed it talking about their offense. Trey Tucker, I think not a lot. I don't think enough people know about Trey Tucker. The guy can be a weapon out there if they just get the ball in his hands. Like, find a way to get the ball in Trey Tucker's hands, and that's going to take a lot of heat off Devontae Adams. And it's going to be a lot easier for defenses to prepare for you if it's just Devontae Adams, week in and week out. But if you can get these other guys involved, Jacoby Myers, you like a lot. I'm not huge on Jacoby Myers, but he's capable. As a number 2, he's capable. And like I said, Trey Tucker, get him a nice role. Zamir White, I like Zamir White. I think it was just time to move on from Josh Jacobs. It is what it is. And you got Zamir White, who's shown some flashes while he's not been in the league very long at all. So you get him, and then Madison as a mentor behind him. And then Abdullah and Dylan Lawbay are there as well. So the backfield is pretty deep. Tight end room, you said it, they're stacked. You didn't even mention they brought in Harrison Bryant free agency this year, who's been a good player at tight end as well. So they got 3 very capable tight ends. And you nailed it. The offensive line is in good shape. I like where their offensive line's at. And of course, they invested a second-round pick in them. And the defense, to me, front seven is in good shape. I would like to see better, consistent linebacker play out of everybody besides Spillane. We know Spillane's a dog out there, but Diablo, if we could just see him play at his full potential, like, that guy is supremely talented. He could do it all out there. It's just about consistency. And Tommy Eichenberg as well, as they drafted this year from Ohio State. Love that kid. Hopefully he gets some time and gets a role on that defense. Just comes down to that secondary. You nailed it. Tyler, what is the best case scenario for the Las Vegas Raiders this season? They're sitting at 6.5 as their win-loss right now.
Yeah, I'm taking that over all day. I know the public is not on the Raiders, so if you can get them at over 6.5 right now at -130, I think that's pretty good value. I think that they have a very capable chance at finishing second in this division. Again, I just hope Gardner gets it done. Otherwise, they could be last. For me, it's either second or last. I don't see, unless the AFC, right? Unless some crazy shit happens, unforeseen shit. I don't see this team making the playoffs. But I see them getting over 6.5. I can see the Raiders getting to 8 wins. 9 would be a great season for this team. 8, I can see them getting to 8 though. If I had to pick a number, I think it's 8. So definitely over 6.5 though. So if you can get that at -130, book it. I'll be betting it tonight.
Yeah, I still think 8 wins would be very good for this team in this season. For Antonio Pierce coming back for his first full-time season as a head coach, I think 8 wins would be great, and I think Raiders fans should be happy with that. Which leads me, before we close this out, Davante Adams doesn't have, too much time left as being the dominant receiver that he is right now, you would think. So I'm curious to see if maybe a move gets done midway through this season and you see him go into, one of these serious contenders. Maybe Mike Williams gets hurt for the Jets early in the season and Aaron Rodgers starts banging the table for them to go after Davante Adams, and he goes and pair him up with Aaron Rodgers again, or something like that.
I don't know, man. I think all the Jets need is Garrett Wilson. I think that kid is a stud. But
they're in good shape.
But yes, Davante Adams doesn't have very many years left playing at the rate that he's playing right now. But what I see happening first, and it's only because the rumors have already been kind of going for a little while now, is them looking for a quarterback. Them finding one of these good veteran quarterbacks who are on their way out with their current team due to, whatever the case is, whether they're just rebuilding or if it's a contract situation like Dak, for example. If shit hits the fan in Dallas and Dak then demands a trade, basically, the Raiders are going to be knocking hard on the Cowboys' door to get Dak in there. That is what I see happening before I see them shipping Davante Adams off somewhere. I see them trying to bring a quarterback in because they have a good roster and they have good pieces. They just need good quarterback play.
Well, this was fun. Once again, thank you to Tyler and Kyler for hopping on and talking about your respected teams with us. This was great. Tyler, it's here. It's tonight. We got Kansas City Chiefs, Baltimore Ravens. Can't wait. Can't wait for Friday. We got a game. Can't wait for Sunday. Once that red zone clock starts counting down on Sunday, man. Oh
man.
I've been dreaming about it for months. But hey, don't forget, if you're on YouTube right now, like and subscribe. Follow us on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Spotify. We will see you next time. Goodbye.
Peace. Yeah, I mean, that's what she said, right? Oh, sorry.
When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll tour. When I come to your city, I'm a new score. Broke your high score soon as I step through the door. Tryna stack my paper up like a bookstore. Money kissing each other like a rock and roll.